Welcome to the Smart Thinking Podcast. This is my dad, Ted.
Welcome to the Smart Thinking Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Knightsky. One of the coolest things that has happened to me over the course of my life and career is just getting to meet all types of different people. Today on the podcast, I have my friend Tim and Emily. Emily is a researcher at Gallup in Omaha, Nebraska, and she is somebody who loves to dive into data and then discuss the practical applications of that data. And Tim is a Clifton Strengths expert. Well, he's beyond an expert. He helped actually write the questions. He's at the University of Nebraska, where he helps undergraduates and people all over the country and the world understand how to apply their strengths to make themselves better people for others. This conversation is an annual conversation I have now had with them, and I will always have with them, because each time we all walk away with some different nuggets and ideas. And in the conversation on this episode, you will hear Tim bring us different ways to apply our strengths, and Emily share with us the current work state and the world of engagement in which we are living. All right. As you listen to this, take notes, find different applications, and of course, as always, remember, each of us is a leader who has influence over other people, and all of the different ways in which Tim and Emily are going to help us is going to help us better influence the world around us. All right, so welcome to the Smart Thinking Podcast. Today I'm joined by two of my favorite friends from Gallup, Emily Lorenz and Tim Hodges, one from Lincoln, Nebraska, one from Omaha, Nebraska, and they have two very different jobs at Gallup, but there are two people that I have learned to lean into when I want to grow my own understanding of the different ways in which all the polling data from Gallup can be used and applied, as well as how to innovate around the Clifton Strengths tools so that we can have better languages, communication, conversations, and most importantly, kind of fulfill our purpose of being able to apply those strengths. So Tim and Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So Emily, I'm going to start with you, and if you wouldn't mind, just kind of give us an overview of what's a day in the life like for you working at Gallup.
Okay, wow. Big question to start off, Ted. I honestly think a day in the life for me at Gallup is, as a researcher, it feels kind of like I'm a kid in a candy shop because I get to do so many cool things. My main responsibility is really thinking through how we're designing our research to make sure that we're collecting data in the best and most rigorous ways possible with the least bias as possible. And so at any given meeting, I might be focused on, helping our team decide what are we measuring, how are we going to measure it, working with clients or other, research teams at Gallup to make sure that we're getting really good data about how people are thinking and feeling across topics ranging from workplace experiences, how people are using and applying their strengths, or even lately I've gotten really deep on some of our K-12 teacher research, which I'm excited to talk about today.
Oh, that is excellent. And tell us again your background. How did you come to Gallup? Your major in college and that journey?
Absolutely. So I studied psychology in my undergrad. I went to the University of Northern Iowa, and I learned pretty quickly that I was one of the only psychology students who really liked the research and stats side of things. I had a really great mentor in college who saw that uniqueness in me, and instead of making me feel weird because I was the only kid that liked it, she really encouraged me to lean into it. I think that's probably the first strengths-based mentor that I had. And her name is Dr. Helen Hart, and I give her a lot of credit for helping set me on this path. And then in graduate school, I actually studied educational measurement and statistics at the University of Iowa. That's where I earned my PhD, and basically just learned how to take what's going on in someone's head, whether it's how much they've learned, how they're feeling about something, and put numbers to it so we can do research to it. And I think I feel like it's such a unique area to study. I ended up, Googling research internships, and I found one at Gallup, and they hired me, and I loved it, and they let me stay. And so I've been at Gallup 7 years now, which feels just like it's been such a fun journey, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Tim, coming to us from the Strengths Institute at the University of Nebraska, he oversees and runs the place. Tim, tell us your journey and kind of what a good day is for you.
Yeah. So I would describe myself as a scholar practitioner with a heavier emphasis these days on the practitioner side of things. So I'm a senior consultant at Gallup, and my job there is to help take genius research from people like Emily and get clients to actually do something with it rather than just agree with it or say that's interesting. So really with that kind of bias towards action after we understand it. My role at the University of Nebraska is as executive director for the Clifton Strengths Institute. So half of that job is teaching about 1,200 students each year that are new students in the University of Nebraska College of Business. They learn their strengths through the Clifton Strengths Assessment. We do one-on-one coaching that's led by upper class students, and then the whole machine that makes that thing run. So that's a big part of the role that I have on campus. And then the other half of my job on campus is an administrator, leading the Institute, really helping tell our story and share what we do with others who would like to do something similar. So it's fun to have people visit and to take our story on the road. So that's kind of that's the summary. My first job out of college was at Gallup. Actually, I wasn't quite out of college when I started. So did my graduate school while I was a full-time Gallup employee, and that was 27 years ago. So it's a good start.
Wow. And Tim, I want to start with you with a question that's been on top of mind for me. Now that so many people in my sphere of life use the Clifton Strengths, and many institutions now are starting to, especially in schools and non-for-profits. I worked with a fire department a couple weeks ago who that chief, she's using this to really kind of grow her leadership. And I have an interesting question for you. What do you suggest for leaders who want to create a strengths culture, who run into people who are resistant to use the strengths language or use reflective practices to try to figure out who they are? Mm-hmm. And their blind spot is literally the tool.
Yeah. Well, there's conversations that can help lead them into it. Usually the best way to turn around a skeptic is to somehow convince them to take the assessment and then to actually have a coaching conversation. I think there's so many assessments out there, and many of them are not well researched, and many of them are not that helpful. And a lot of times people have a label from an assessment they took in the past, and that's why their resistance is there. So I think if you can get them to do the assessment and then actually talk to them about it, that's the win. If you can't get them to take the assessment, there's still ways that we can affirm, hey, I see this in you. Ted, you're the most creative person I've talked to in weeks. You're always coming up with great ideas. I wonder if you could leverage that in this project we're going to work on, right? So to get someone on board by saying, I've seen you do this in the past, some glimpse of excellence or something that you've just done really well, that's evidence there's a strength there. Whether Gallup uses the language around that theme or not, there's ways you can call that out. And that usually gets people on board. But yeah, too many people treat the assessment as the intervention, and the development really happens after the assessment with some good information there. Now let's talk about how we're going to apply it.
I like the reflection on somewhere in their past, someone used some tool as a weapon, right? Like, oh, that's so analytical of you, or the opposite, where someone uses it to like self-advocate, but they weaponize their own results. Like, well, you know me, I'm just a blah, blah, blah. So yeah. I love that you call that out.
Ted, you've got a lot of listeners that are parents, teachers, people who've been in psychology classes along the way. We all know about behavior modification, right? If you see someone doing something wrong, you're quick to correct them. Hey, don't put your hand on that stove. Hey, don't play in the street, things like that. What we miss is the positive behavior modification. Hey, the way you were a great teammate at that soccer match today was amazing. Or, hey, the way that I saw you land that presentation in class today was the best I've seen all week. That positive behavior modification gives people a little bit of a bump in their mood, and it causes you to say, wow, that felt good. I want to do that again. That's what this whole strengths conversation is about, is helping spot those patterns and that potential and then putting in positions to thrive even more.
Yeah, normalize positivity. It's the number one intervention in every psychology and intervention-based text is positive reinforcement. You want a kid to stop talking in class, catch them being good. You want someone to get their homework in. You want someone to be kinder, reinforce the behavior you want more of. So that's really, really good advice.
And instead of telling that kid who wants to talk in class that he needs to sit quietly like everybody else, let him start the class, right? Mm-hmm. Ask him a question before the bell even rings to help him feel seen and feel needed. And then, move on to the other things you need to do. So yeah, that's great.
That's awesome. Emily, in your world of research, what are some of the key findings and things of yours that are recent learnings?
Oh, okay. Tim, or Ted, sorry, I might make you narrow it down because I'm curious. Do you want to hear about like the U.S. workforce? Do you want to hear about Clifton strengths? Do you want to hear about K-12 teachers? Like, point me in a direction.
Yeah, let's start with K-12 teachers.
Awesome.
The bulk of our audience and something everyone has had.
Of course. So right now, I have opportunity to be a part of a really cool study that Gallup is working on with the Walton Family Foundation, where over the course of 3 years, we're doing 10 nationally representative surveys of teachers. We just finished writing our 7th survey, and we've been collecting a ton of data on their experiences. One of the most recent things that we've published on is about materials, equipment, and resources for teachers at work. It's pretty common to hear teachers don't have enough stuff, right? They feel like they're lacking equipment and resources. I know from working with school districts, and I know you both know this as well, the materials and equipment item on our K-12 engagement score is among the lowest for K-12 educators. And we decided to dedicate an entire survey to unpacking what exactly that means. And does it come from not having enough of things, not having enough people? Does it come from maybe they have resources, but they're not good enough? And we really tried to disentangle all of these different components. And one of the things that we found was a huge differentiator for whether teachers actually felt like they had what they need to do their job well was the people around them. Did they have enough support staff? Were there enough administrators to help them when they needed it? Did they have enough paraprofessionals, special education teachers in their school, even, like behavior intervention specialists, et cetera? Like that was where teachers really spoke out. 2/3 of them said, I don't have enough of these other people at my school to help me do my job effectively. And even if that person is not someone that's going to be in their classroom all the time, they're still feeling the pressure of not having enough of those resources, because when you don't have that support staff at school, you can't help all of your students learn to the best of their ability, because it's, we can get into classroom ratios and whatnot, but I want to pause there and get a reaction from you, Ted and Tim, just to see, what do you think of that latest finding?
That does not surprise me at all, unfortunately, because I think about this often, having a son who's teaching the same thing I taught. And when I started teaching in the 90s, budgets were different, mindsets were different, and we had support. Over the last 30 years, we have seen a systemic dismantling of the infrastructure of public schools and frankly all schools, where dollars are tighter, and the one thing that you don't cut is the classroom teacher. You just reduce everything around them. It would be interesting, Emily, to hear from you. Are there any demographic? Is there demographic data in there that shows like teachers who have 10 or more years of experience, 20 or more years of experience, and how that number sways back and forth?
Mm-hmm. So across the board, it's about 2/3 of teachers are saying I don't have enough people resources at my school, but it definitely is higher for teachers who have been teaching fewer years. So newer teachers in particular are feeling the strain of this more so than more tenured teachers. And a lot of that may come down to like classroom management experience. It may come down to still, early in your career, you're navigating a lot of these, taking what you've learned and putting it into practice with a real class independently for the first time. And so there is a lot of nuances there when you look at tenure. We also see schools that are unfortunately in lower socioeconomic areas. Teachers really report at a higher rate that they're struggling with getting the people resources they need to help them effectively teach their students.
So this hits me differently. So this is more proof data does not have a heartbeat, so it does not deserve an emotional
Yes.
response. Because I would have thought the exact opposite. I would have thought younger teachers would have rated the need for support lower. But as you were speaking, I understand that's more reinforcement of practice, supportive practice, understanding of practice, mentoring, etc. I would have thought people in my season of life, the 15 to 30 year veterans, would be saying, I used to have an aide in my classroom. The special educator used to have an aide in her classroom with me. We used to have 2 assistant principals. We used to have a librarian. We used to have a media specialist. We used to have social workers. We used to have psychologists. That is really interesting that it was the younger part of the demographic group. Maybe the people my age have just calloused to it and that's the way it used to be. Cars didn't have seatbelts. Now we do kind of mindset.
Well, I think repetition definitely helps, right? When you think about a more experienced teacher, they've maybe had more situations where they've had to navigate some of these things, even though they may currently have less resources than they used to have. And I think for newer teachers, I mean, not just K-12 in general, anytime you're starting a new job, regardless of the industry, you're facing challenges because you're learning how to navigate a brand new environment. You're learning how to navigate so many different people and situations that you maybe haven't found yourself in before. So if you take that experience on top of not having enough of what you need to actually do your job well, it's a recipe for stress and burnout that we are seeing in a lot of teachers. One of the things that has always baffled me with K-12 education and teachers and resources is that, no one would ever look at me as a researcher and say, oh, she doesn't have a laptop that works. That's kind of too bad. You're going to have to make it work. Or I don't have, if I didn't have the right analysis tools to do my job, so many people would say, well, that's a huge issue. We need to fix it. Whereas I think with K-12 education, sometimes we've unfortunately normalized the fact that teachers don't always have enough of what they need to do their job well. And I think that narrative around us getting so used to that is part of the problem.
Oh my gosh. Educator friends, you can find Emily's address to send her a thank you note for that comment on the Gallup website in Omaha, Nebraska. I think, Emily, the one thing, too, that you just pointed out, I think is important to call out is that if a teacher and an administrator didn't have what they needed and their budget didn't support it, there's a very high likelihood that they would just go get it themselves.
Yep, definitely.
Did that come out of the survey?
We didn't measure it specifically. It did come through in a lot of our interviews that we did to prepare for writing this survey, but you are spot on, Ted. K-12 industry is unprecedented in terms of people buying with their own money the resources they need to do their job effectively. And we can't name another scenario. I can't come up with another industry where that is as normal as it is for K-12 teachers.
Oh, that's why they're amazing.
Tim,
what are you thinking?
Well, I'm trying to think about nurses stopping at the Walgreens on the way to their shift, buying Band-Aids or something. And that just, other industries, I don't think it happens like that. My comment or reaction is really appreciating, Emily, how you and your team dug in deeper to find out the question behind the question. And I think that's good information. We all get survey data back and we have our assumptions about what it means. But if you look at an item like at work, I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right, you might default to thinking, oh, that probably means technology, access to better hardware, software, one device, all these kind of things. And if you don't ask, hey, what would a 5 look like? What would it look like to be excellent on this question? You would have missed the whole thing about it's really a staffing issue as much as it is access to the newest and greatest technology. So I think sometimes we need to be curious when we see results, not make assumptions about that. And that's my biggest takeaway, Emily, from what you shared there.
Yeah, and I think a couple weeks ago I had Jared Horvath, who's a neuroscientist and author on, and he talks about the ed tech industry, and it's a creeping cost effect in public schools, private schools, universities, where the infrastructure for technology that didn't exist 40 years ago is now such a significant part of the budget that it comes at the cost of the support structures that are there. If you have a bunch of touch boards, every one of those is $10,000 to $25,000, and then there's the technology to back it, and the guy or girl who comes in and fixes it. And I think we're on a really unique trend here where that's going to swing back. So, with that, Emily, was there findings in there about better technology, more stuff? Did that come up as? I mean, I'm assuming the simple things that Mrs. Knightsky, my wife, 8th grade language arts teacher, pretty much twice a week an Amazon package comes in the mail that I open up and I'm like, what do you need these gigantic clips for? And she's like, oh, well, it's part of the book that we're reading, and the book has this blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, so you bought 100 of them at 40 cents a piece, and we're blessed to be in the position for you to buy them, but like, why didn't your school buy them? So anyways, going back to the question, Emily, was technology, in there, like all the jazzy stuff of schools?
Okay, I'm gonna break this answer into 3 different parts, and I'll try to make them brief because there's so much I want to discuss here. But in terms of technology, we saw that teachers felt like they had enough of it, but that the quality of it was where some of them were feeling the strain. So think about every single student in my district has a Chromebook, but they're breaking all the time. Or and that's nothing against the Chromebooks. That I'm just sharing an anecdote that can apply to any tablets, any laptop that students are getting in a one-to-one scenario. One of the second part of what I wanted to share was, the technology is such a big piece of it. We are actually about to field a full survey about this topic, specifically about device use and screen time in classrooms, because that has become such an insane topic with, how do we navigate the behavior issues that sometimes come with the increased technology against some of the value and individualization and differentiation and scaffolding we're able to do at a quicker pace because of this technology. There's so many different nuances. In our research to prepare for that survey, I think every single teacher I spoke with had a very strong emotional reaction to the topic, one way or another, because it's something that affects them so deeply. The third part of what I wanted to share is I don't know if this is maybe an unconventional thing to think about, but so much of the conversation in K-12 right now is focused on technology, and we have a lot of data on it. But our latest survey showed that 1 out of every 4 classroom teachers said they don't even have enough furniture in their classroom for the number of students they have to teach. And I can talk all day about technology, and I would love to. We've got so much data on it. But that is something that when you asked about K-12 teachers and we started talking about resources, I just had to mention that 1 in 4 stat, because it's something that's seemingly so foundational. And the conversation right now is steering so much towards AI and advanced technology in the classroom. And there's teachers who are shouting at the rooftops, I don't have enough chairs. So I'll get off my high horse there for a second. I'd love to hear what you both think of that.
It's like a hierarchy of needs for a classroom teacher and a principal. And I mean, the truth is we're spending our time on the top of that needs list, thinking that there's more solutions at the point there with technology and infrastructure. And we can figure out the desks and the tables, and we can find stuff. And when you jam 33 kids in a room that was designed for 25 in 1940, and then they're sitting on top of each other, and then you're trying to meet their emotional needs, their social needs, and then their learning needs. It's not surprising to me as a lifetime educator. It's such good data. I can't wait to get my hands on that and share that with others. So switching topics now to strengths with Tim, I just want to talk a little bit here about, knowing what Emily just shared with us. If we're leading in these organizations, what do you think would be the best approach to lean into our Clifton strengths if we're trying to build that culture, maintain engagement? And, on the Q12, I don't have the materials I need to be successful. How would you advise others to coach in that situation? And more importantly, how to personally, apply your strengths in those situations?
Yeah. It makes me think of this. I don't know if it happened or if it's just a legend, but there was a need to provide better technology to villages let's just say in sub-Saharan Africa. And so there were these laptops dropped off. Well, you come back later and see how they were using it. And many of them were just using it for a source of light. after it got dark outside, right? So, sometimes we have good intentions, but without people close to the action speaking into those decisions, we can make, maybe not the best application. I'm going to come back to the word curious. I'm going to come back to a theme around individualization. What materials and equipment looks like to me would be different than what it looks like for you, even if we're both sixth grade teachers. So let's just say walking down the hall, let's say I'm a principal. I walk down the hall and Ted and Emily are both sixth grade teachers. On one side, it's kind of noisy. People are bouncing around on these balls instead of chairs, and all this. On the other side, they're seated neatly in rows. They're paying attention. They're raising their hand when they have a question. Well-intentioned administrators might say, hey, this one's doing it right, that one's not. And different administrators would prioritize different ones. The win is, are the kids learning? Are they engaged? Is the teacher using their strengths in that situation? I think we need to be a little lighter on the process and a little heavier on the outcomes, and then let someone really operate within their own strengths. So some teachers are more kinesthetic by nature, but if you tell everyone that their students should be running around the room during class, that's not a great fit for everyone. So ideally, we're catering to what the student's strengths are, but at a minimum, we ought to be catering to what the teacher's strengths are and help them kind of put together a plan that uses the best of who they are, because the students can tell when you're using your strengths, you're more engaged, and we learn more from people who love what they're doing. So it's a simplistic example, but it's tempting to say, here's a rubric everyone needs to follow, and 6 minutes into the bell period, you need to be at this page or this slide or this bullet point. Not necessarily. So I think we've got to have a little more latitude and treat professionals like professionals, right? Be clear on the outcomes, have high expectations, offer high levels of support, but be a little less prescriptive and sometimes a lot less prescriptive about the steps in the process. So maybe that's a political rant or something, but I think there's something in there about individualizing to what the teacher does best and letting them use it.
But your point of curiosity driving the really, where's this coming from? Where's the pinch point and the frustration? And then why is it such a value that it is creating conflict? And wondering about that versus trying to get everybody to fit into kind of your own vision of what people are supposed to act like, behave like, and be like. No, I think that's fantastic.
Well, and sometimes back to the materials and equipment issue and strengths related, sometimes we see that our most amazing teacher, the teacher of the year, and their process is to have students on, yoga balls instead of chairs. And so sometimes then we overreact and we buy everybody a yoga ball. And then what happens is we got a whole supply closet full of yoga balls that never get used. And we got some teachers who that's not their style. So again, it's a little messy and it doesn't scale quite as well. But if we really care about what works for each student, we need to care about what works for each teacher and then individualize within reason, of course. But I think sometimes we see it works here. Let's do it 1,000 times with everybody. Not always.
Yeah, I get in a little bit of trouble sometimes, and you two can respond to this. Sometimes I think one of the worst things that's ever happened outside of medicine, is research-based best practice. Because that research took place in some unique place, and then everybody's trying to imitate it, and they're not considering one thing which you just really pointed out, which is that human beings have a mind of their own, and they want to do things the way they want to, and what works for them under what set of conditions is different for everybody. So your yoga ball example, seen it 1,000,000 times. This worked really well for, Jenny down in 3rd grade, so we're going to have everybody do it. And then 1, everybody hates Jenny. And then 2, everybody, resists whatever the different pieces are. And I just want the listeners to recognize my growth there in using Jenny instead of Karen. Okay, so Tim, what are some unique and interesting things that are taking place in the world of strengths? Where are we evolving there?
Yeah, Ted, on that last point though, there's faces behind the numbers. And again, just like let's study the trends, let's study what's working, but then let's also realize, one size doesn't always fit all. One of the exciting things about strengths, it continues to explode, right? So at the time of this recording, maybe we're at 37 million people around the world that have had the opportunity to take the assessment and learn their strengths. I get more excited about the the millions and millions of people who are being really intentional about growing through that. The reporting has gotten better and better and more individualized, and there's some great things coming out that there'll be some role-based reports where you and I might have the same top 5, but if we have a different job, the application of our strengths is going to look a little different. So I've loved how there's been leveraging technology and other resources to help really individualize more and more what might this look like for you specifically. And the more we know about you, the better we can meet you there. So I'm really excited about some of the research and innovations that are coming out that really help to cater specifically to the individual. Sometimes we throw around the number that there's, the chances you and I would have the same top 5 is 1 in 278,256. And that's if we don't care what order they're in. If we care about the order, it's like 1 in 33 million. So strengths are really individualized. What we don't often talk about is even if you and I have the same top 5, our report is going to look different based on the algorithm and the statements that are thrown off in those strengths insight statements. So infinite is a really big number, but there's a near infinite number of possible combinations of strengths and the application of that within. So I love how it's gotten so personalized. And one of the 25 years ago, one of the criticisms of strengths was, it's a label or you just put people in these boxes and so on. I don't think it ever really was, but it's definitely not now because there's so many different versions of what your ideation looks like or what your arranger looks like or what your individualization looks like. So I'm really excited about that as a recent innovation and really hitting people where they are.
I wanted to get your reaction on this. And Emily's, one of the things we've started to do now when we work with an organization and they do strengths-based and we get their team grid. And for listeners, a team grid is, it says Ted Knightsky, Tim Hodges, Emily Lorenz, and then it shows our top 10 in a grid on the 4 categories of strengths. So, if you're an influencer, if you're strategic, if you're relationship-based, et cetera. And then it fills in the squares, and it's a great teaming tool. But we have now been printing those, and it was my colleague Jean Marie's idea, 5 foot by 8 foot, and then giving them to them for wherever they meet so that it's literally wallpaper, forcing people to reflect into that. Because one of the things that we did, and I have no idea if this is unique, but when I'm coaching teams, I will have everybody score on their own report, so if Emily's number 1 is my 32, I circle 32. And then after Emily discloses this is my strength, reads the report to the whole group, everybody answers 3 questions. How do we see that in Emily? So Emily, what's your number 1?
Achiever.
So Emily reads her achiever. People in the room are like, holy moly, this is so Emily. That's exactly, oh my gosh, everything's making sense. Emily goes through, reads her whole report, everything from what to expect to her blind spots. And then everybody in the room answers this question. How do we see Emily use that strength? And the whole room answers that question. The second thing I ask Emily, what do we need to do different to support you in that strength? So then Emily's like, well, sometimes when I get, and I'm like, I don't think it's good enough. And I think we could do a little bit better. I think there's a better way to ask that question. I would ask for your patience and empathy because that's where I'm coming from that. And then the third question we ask is, Emily, when we see you operating in your blind spot, how can we best bring that to your attention? And people will say, throw something at me because I will just be myopic in my thinking. What's fun is after that conversation, I say achiever for me is 22. And then we talk about okay, so how could that create a pinch point? Because I don't care if we have glitter glue on the poster or if it's spelled right. Is it ready to go? Let's go. Because I'm high strategic and I just want to move. But then it creates that wonderful language. How are you guys seeing, people approaches in team coaching or, Emily on your team or Tim with students? How do you approach that type of a conversation?
Yeah, one quick reaction is how I love how much you give the person a chance to say, here's what this means to me. And then there's a chance for people to offer feedback about that. That takes away any of the, it's just a label or whatever. So the person then has some agency or ownership about their themes in a big way. And then it's more like, okay, so what are we going to do to set you up for success about that more and to manage the times when it can be challenging? So I love the voice that you're giving each person in that process. People are quick to throw things in a team grid and act like they accomplished something. And I think it's interesting, but it's not until you have a conversation like that that something changes. So good job.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I probably cite this finding way more than I should. It's just so good. This study we did, it was a while ago, but we set out to discover, was there a certain combination of strengths that made a team more effective? And everyone has these guesses. Oh, I bet it's teams that lead with this, or nobody has this strength, or people can have their guesses, right? And we found that more than anything else, it just mattered that the team knew each other's strengths. That was more important than the actual strengths of the people on the team. And I think, Ted, the way you described coaching that team falls perfectly into our research on it, because it doesn't matter that I have achiever really high and you have achiever really low, as long as we know that about each other. And so when I'm driving us to get a checklist of things to do and you're trying to, ideate and help us activate on our next new idea, like, we're not frustrated with each other because I understand that the way you're thinking about it is really, really valuable in certain contexts. And it's very different from the way that I think about it, which is also very valuable in certain contexts. It's interesting, kind of ties back to what we were saying about Jenny with her yoga balls in her classroom, is there's so much context that needs to be considered when we're really working through these things.
See, I honestly thought, Emily, your answer to that question was going to be, as long as you have someone who's a visionary, strategic, and activator in their top three, that would be a highly effective team. I'm a little disappointed that my top three was not the findings of the research, but
Sorry, Ted.
I think one of my favorite things about
the
strengths.
fun part is, for you, that is the right answer. So you're right. It just wouldn't work for everybody.
Yeah. But I would tell you, when you're on a team with 3 or 4 people who have similar strengths like that, regardless of the order, if they lead heavy with those different pieces, that's a very unique dynamic as well.
Yeah. And you have to know that about each other, because you're all going to get along probably pretty well, but you're going to have some very intense blind spots as a team if you don't know, like, hey, we are all so similar in here. We're thinking about this in the same way. Where are we challenging each other? Because I think some of the best work happens when people who are nothing alike can come together and say, this is what I think, this is what I think, and maybe we don't agree, but let's find the best path forward using my experience and strengths and your experience and your strengths.
Yeah, I was coaching a team in Ripon, Wisconsin. Shout out Ripon. And the high school principal, after our second coaching session, had come back and he said he was in a faculty meeting and he had to deliver like some very specific, very clear, like step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4 kind of news. Not a lot of space for emotion, people, harmony, type of strengths. And after the coaching, he realized he had this one faculty member who was pretty frequently would ask those, well, what about the people? And he learned from himself, his language was, that's a wonderful thing to worry about, but right now we can't. So I'm going to just ask you to turn that down so we can keep moving forward. Because that's my coaching language with people, is you can never, and I think I might have picked it up from Tim or someone around him, but you can never turn off a strength, but you could turn it down. And, there are times and places for it. As a matter of fact, one time I was coaching, and I do want to hear what your thoughts are on this. This person's top 10, 7 of them were influencing. And it was like, it wasn't scattered. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then like 8, 9, and 10 were relationship. So this is like somebody who can, walk into a room and win the room and clearly articulate exactly what needs to be done. And his number 1 was communication. And he had an executive coach once who told him, you just need to stop talking. And then he runs into me and I'm like, oh, no, this is who you are. You just got to figure out a way to turn it down once in a while and have a wing person who's next to you to say like, hey, this is a good time to you're at volume 10 again, bring that down to 1. How do you guys deal with that when you're coaching?
Well, I parent someone who is very similar to what you just described. So my son has 8 of his top 10 are in all of the influencing themes are in his top 10, including all of his top 6. So just take a deep breath on that. That's a lot to parent, right? Because there's a lot of energy there competition number one, a lot of activator, woo, significance, communication, and on down the list, right? So honestly, I feel like a fraud because I've known this stuff since before he was born, but you've got to apply it. You can't just intellectually know it. So yeah, Liam's his name. So Liam's number one is competition. And as a middle schooler, Liam would go down the street. They'd play a wiffle ball game in the somebody's front yard, and 35 minutes later he'd come back, slam the door. It's like, what's going on? Well, I won, but those guys just blah 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 blah. And I'm looking at the calendar, realizing it's still May. We've got 3 more months of summer. You can't get kicked out of every game. So we had to think, okay, we could say don't be so competitive, which is probably what I did say some days. That didn't work. What we need to do is say, how do we redefine the win, right? What does a win look like? For the parents, a win looks like you still get invited back in June and July and August to play these games. There's going to be a long summer in your bedroom, right? So I want to leverage that competition, not try and tamp it down. Now, yeah, self-regulation is an important part of strengths, right? We need to realize not every situation deserves the full blast of your number one theme, but to honor that and to say, you're going to bring a lot of energy to situations. So how do we manage that? That's what we're learning. He's 21 now, reasonably well-adjusted adult, gainfully employed, graduating college, engaged to be married. Like there's a lot of good things going on in this kid's life. But there were some years there where mostly it was his parents' fault because we tried to change him. And again, I should have known better, but here we are.
Well, but again, there's a difference when you coach from an emotional position versus coaching to a logical position. I think this is something too, and then we'll get back into engagement here in a second. I think when you're working with colleagues that you're close to, there's a paralysis sometimes to call out those blind spots, step into that space, and have confrontation conversations. I care enough to confront you because you kind of know where it could possibly go. But then at the same time, when you introduce this language, it provides you that bridge to say, hey, I love you. However, right now, for you to be focusing on harmony and worrying about what everybody's going to think about with this benefit change, while we are trying to save the school district, the company, the agency, because we have to make this adjustment, I'm going to need you to turn that down. And maybe they'll storm out of the office, but they'll come back in a little different spot. Have you two ever experienced that? Have you ever been coached to your strengths? Like, now's the time to just kind of shut up and, Emily, you're nodding your head.
Yes.
So
objectively, yes. I mean, I even think about a meeting I had earlier today where me and a couple colleagues were trying to make some decisions about a dashboard that we're building for some metrics we're collecting. And I kept catching myself thinking, 3, 6, 12 months ahead, like, how can I maximize this? How can this be the best it can be? And we have a really good working relationship as a team, this team that we were working on. And it came down to a little bit of self-awareness for me saying, okay, Emily, you are over maximizing. And me telling the team, like, hey, I think I might be over maximizing. Am I? And they're all nodding like, yes, you are. Like you're thinking 12 months ahead and how to make this perfect. And we just need something simple to, get out the door and with excellence, of course. But I think there have been moments. I lead with achiever and maximizer. So I want to get stuff done and I want it to be perfect. And I've been coached on that many times. Like, Emily, got to tone it down. Like an A- is good enough for this particular thing for where we're at in the project right now. And if you keep trying to take us from 93% to 96%, you're going to be wasting time. And I think there's an element of humility there that I've been, coached to understand as well, because I know, okay, that's something that makes me uniquely me when I am working on stuff, because people can rely on me to get it done and to aim for excellence. But the same people who rely on me for that also need to be the ones to help me understand you're going a little too far with this. So I think from the being on the receiving end of that coaching this is what I help other people understand too when I'm coaching them is it's not a bad thing. But if you're noticing friction, you have to understand, you know what, this is a strength of mine that I'm just applying really intensely in maybe the wrong situation. That doesn't mean it's not helpful. That doesn't mean it's not valuable to the team. That means just maybe right here and right now, not the move, not the right move. So
I think for you and Tim, I'd love to hear your response on this. I love that you gave permission. So am I over maximizing? Is a permission for me to step onto that dance floor of your strengths to say, yes, you are. However, I might be sitting there thinking it forever and trying to build up the courage to have that conversation because maybe I lead with relationships and maybe I don't want anybody upset, or, maybe I'm a woo person. I'm just waiting for you to stop talking so I can start talking. Tim, how are you working with that type of self-advocacy and empathy when you're working with undergraduate students at Nebraska?
Yeah, great question. I think there's 4 powerful words in coaching. What do you think? Right? So I had a couple of leaders in my class the other day. One of them is the chairman of the company, the other's a governor of their state, and this great leadership conversation. And one of the students asked the governor for leadership advice, and their response was there were times in their career that they'd run a successful business, and when people would come to them with a challenging question, they would give an answer. And it feels good for our ego to be asked and to be sought out, and like they can't possibly take the next step until I tell them what to do next. That feels good if we're insecure. But if we're really trying to create the capacity for other people to solve their own problems, then when someone comes to us with a challenge or comes to us for coaching and we say, wow, that sounds hard, what do you think you should do next? They almost always know. And it creates a moment where we can say, wow, I think you got a good plan, and sometimes we need to redirect, but most of the time, as long as their answer is close to the right answer, giving them that agency back and giving them that, what do you think? They just need to practice their ideas out loud with someone, and then away they go. So I see that in my work with students all the time. They come in asking about advice for interviews. They've got 2 job offers and they're not sure which to accept, or, grad school, they got 2 law schools they want to go to. And, and a lot of times I just, well, what do you think? Well, I think this is. And then they're like, wow, thanks. That was so great. I said one thing the entire conversation, but we don't create enough space for people to share what they really think and to talk it through with someone who cares about them. So I think a lot of times coaching is just showing up, reflecting back, hey, what do you think? And then looking for openings to affirm something or challenge something. But so many of the answers are inside the person. They just need somebody to sit and listen and draw it out.
I love that, because really what it is I think every one of us is looking for a few things every single day. One is validation that I'm going to be okay, that my ideas are good, that the direction I'm heading is with the direction I should head. The second thing is, somebody to sit across the table from you and listen to your narratives to find out if my narrative is accurate or insane. And then the third thing I would say is a trusting person to be able to remind you, like Emily, you did with your team, where they gave you that feedback and put you in that position.
And I don't just get on board and endorse or affirm every idea they have. I mean, if they say something that feels off base or doesn't look like the right direction, I'll often say something like, wow, that's interesting. What other ideas do you have? Yeah. And then when they come up with another one, then jump on that. But, I might know an answer because I've been in their shoes, but it was a long time ago and I'm literally their dad's age now. So it just hits a little different, but we follow the advice best if we were part of creating it, right? I mean, we set goals. We're more likely to achieve those goals. Someone hands us a goal, it's a coin flip whether we'll make it or not. So it's that walking them through, giving them that space to say out loud and then just to jump on it and go with it.
Mm-hmm. Tim, I love how you started with, like, what do you think? And those really 4 important words, because it's really important for Clifton Strengths coaching. But even when we think about the workforce and performance management, which so many people struggle with, nobody loves a performance review, right? It's almost never the best meeting of the day. And I think most of the time people know when they're not doing well. Like they can sense it. And oftentimes you can figure out a lot about what's going on with someone's performance by simply asking them, like, hey, how do you feel like that client presentation went? And they might tell you, you know what, something's going on with me personally. I didn't get sleep for 3 weeks and I'm totally bummed and I'm so sorry. And here's what I'm going to do to fix it. And it makes it so much easier to resolve some of these things. Now, that's not a blanket statement. Not every situation is going to unfold like that. But just like you were saying, Tim, with people being more likely to achieve their goals and reach that next milestone, whether it's work, school, anything, maybe well-being related. If they're a part of that goal creation, it's going to be so much more meaningful for them in a lot of different contexts.
I think it works when there's hard conversations too. I had a student come in the other day who had gotten a no pass in a class that I teach, and it's a required class, so they were going to have to retake the class. And so they asked if we could meet, and sure, yeah, we can meet. So we get together, and I was welcoming. I said, hey, what are we here to talk about today? Well, I got a no pass in your class, and I want to revisit that. I was like, oh, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Why did you get a no pass? Well, I think it's because I didn't attend enough classes. Oh, I said, what's the attendance policy on the syllabus? Well, I think it says I can miss 4. I said, well, I think it says you can miss 2. Oh, okay, so I can miss 2. I said, well, how many did you miss? Well, I missed 5. Oh, I said, is everything okay? Yeah, I just wasn't feeling it. It's an 8:30 class, and I just don't wake up in the mornings real well. And I was like, well, that sounds hard, And I said, what do you want to do about it? He's like, well, I guess I have to retake the class. I said, well, I look forward to seeing you next semester. And that was the end of it, right? It's kind of the classic, the police officer comes up and says, do you know how fast you were going? I mean, if you say I was going 82 and a 55, then the rest of our conversation is going to be pretty quick, right? So
Right.
It's that giving them that ownership of the decision and the actions that they had. And then you get to be a part of the solution. I think about when you're in a tense situation, and I've got a colleague who actually does this, where they'll physically reposition the room, where instead of sitting across the table from the person that there's this tension with, they'll sit next to them. Then it's like the problem is figuratively across the table. So they're working together to solve the problem rather than the person being the problem. So there's different ways to go, but there's hard conversations we have to have. But if we're both united in the same goal and get them to take ownership, it tends to go better. So I don't think he got the response he wanted in that conversation. I think he wanted me to go ahead and pass him because he took the initiative to meet. But I think he left realizing, okay, that wasn't great, but I get it. So that ownership is so important.
Well, and good for you too in that position to just listen, let him speak, and then find his way, which is right back to you. And maybe don't sign up for the 8:30 class.
Right.
Take the later one.
Or go to bed before 3 a.m. if that's part of the problem.
Yeah, that's right. Let's go, U of N. So with that, Emily, let's talk a little bit about the state of the world and the global workforce report that came out recently. What are some of the interesting trends here that people should be paying attention to as we do this? We are very excited in my world. We have a lot of school districts using engagement, and we're finding as soon as leadership starts to focus on the people, everything that rises with it. It's the tide that rises all boats. And I mean, I would love to call out some of these school systems, but remarkable results in a very short period of time when you're focusing on the people. What in the world is going on in 2026?
There's a lot going on, Ted, for better and for worse in so many different ways. But I'll just give a few highlights and we can build on them. But our metrics are showing that global employee engagement is at its lowest since 2020. So only 20% of global workers are engaged with their jobs. When you look at the US specifically, it's 31%. When you look at best practice organizations like TED, the organizations you work with, the organizations we work with at Gallup, they're floating at around 70%. So I don't want to paint such a bleak picture that people think it cannot be done. But there's ways to turn it around. The other thing that has been so fascinating, and this theme has been bubbling up across our research over the course of a few years, but a lot of the decline that we're seeing is actually from managers, the middle management who are responsible for taking the vision of the leaders and translating it to managing their teams. Managers are in a really interesting spot right now because we're seeing a decline in manager engagement. And at the same time, we're saying, hey, managers, I know your engagement is declining, but by the way, you're responsible for making sure your whole team is engaged. And on top of that, we're going to make sure that your team is actually 50% bigger on average than it was 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So managers are really getting the squeeze, pressure from leadership and the people they're managing to be doing so many different things. And it's hard to do it right. We know that only about 1 in 10 people actually have the true talent that it takes to be a manager. There's another 20% or so who can like effectively be trained and upskilled to be a good manager. But for most people, that's not a natural way of working or behaving for them. And oftentimes we put the wrong people in the management position, and that's what leads us to a lot of what we're seeing right now, where, you know, they're getting the squeeze, if you will.
What are some of the findings on how to close that gap for middle managers? I think this is a cyclical problem. When the economy's good, we invest
Totally.
more and more people. We drop, groups and expectations. When things get tough, strategy kind of drives down into the organization. What are some kind of tips and tricks there, and even thinking in kind of the public sector and private sector?
I think, this is going to sound overly simple, so I apologize in advance, but communication is a lot of it. When we ask people like, why are you feeling this pressure? Let's give an example here, Ted. Let's say you're the leader of the company that Tim and I work for, and I'm Tim's manager. You give me a vision and tell me, hey, we're making all these changes. AI is coming. We're going to restructure our organization, and you're going to be doing a bunch of different things. And by the way, you're now managing 3 more people than you were last year. And I'm struggling to navigate that. And I might not have as much time to spend with you and get clarity with you and coaching from you on how to be managing my team, because you're so busy with all of these massive organizational changes and economic disruptions that so many organizations are facing right now. So then poor Tim over here gets the short end of the stick because I don't have as much time for our regular one-on-ones. I'm still feeling a little bit unclear about some of the changes we're experiencing because, Ted, you're a great communicator, but I need more information than what I'm able to get from you right now because you are so busy. And Tim and the 9 other people on the team are struggling with their own things. Right now we're seeing that the rate of employees across the United States who are thriving has fallen below 50%, which is pretty unprecedented. In the fall of 2025, we had for the first time ever in Gallup's tracking, more employees who were struggling in their well-being than were thriving in their well-being. And so everyone's really not doing their best compared to how things might have been going emotionally and well-being wise a few years ago. But a lot of it starts with, Ted, what information and support you're giving me so that I can scaffold that to my team.
Where has net promotion gone through all of this? One of my favorite statistics you gave me 3 years ago was that 72% of people who work in the public sector do not recommend their jobs to loved ones. Does that trend continue as we see well-being drop, thriving going down? Like, what is happening in the sector of kind of investing back in where you work and suggesting your work to others?
Yeah. I don't think we have an updated trend on that as of recently, but I do have some other data that I think could help with that. Right now, one of the key drivers of decline in engagement that we're seeing is whether people feel like their supervisor or someone cares about them as a person at work. And I think it's really facilitating a lot of emotional detachment to jobs. And I think if you pair that with the fact that, only like between 20 and 30%, I think 28% of people say now is actually a good time to find a job. You've got a lot of people who are feeling not supported, not cared about at work, and they feel stuck. So from an employer standpoint, I have a group of employees who maybe don't love working here, maybe aren't feeling cared about, or maybe struggling with a lot of different things personally and professionally. And in a normal situation, in a normal economy, whatever that is, they would quit their jobs and move to a different job. But right now, college-educated workers are actually more pessimistic about the job market than those who do not have a college degree. And we're seeing that being turned on its head. And so there's a lot of unprecedented things happening right now. So Ted, I'm sorry, I'm so passionate about this topic. I feel like my input and learner just word vomited research at you both.
No.
I'm recognizing that self-awareness. I'm going to pause for a moment and hear what you both have to say about what I just shared.
That's called the curse of knowledge, when you know so much you don't even know where to start. But I do have a question for you about the cares about them. Is there
Yeah.
any correlation between remote workers and in-person workers for some of this data that we're seeing now in engagement in the United States? As you're watching companies bring everybody back in and remembering, hey, maybe human connection actually works a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm going to be totally honest, Ted. I am not familiar with the patterns on that off the top of my head. So this is a moment where I'll be transparent and share. I'm not exactly sure what those findings are. I have some hunches,
Yeah, that's
but I
okay.
don't want to lead anyone astray.
Yeah. Tim, as you're listening to this conversation, what advice do you have, coming either from the strengths perspective or just your life of leadership perspective, especially about cares about them?
I've been working with a lot of higher ed institutions and some K-12 districts, and when we look at engagement data, there's a couple of items that really seem to be struggling lately. One is I know what's expected of me at work, and the other is very strengths related. I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day, and I feel like for the last 3 or 4 years, as I've seen that decline, I've said, well, during COVID, we all had to cover for each other and did things that were maybe a little bit out of our skill set, just out of necessity or because of this or that. I think it's more in anticipation of changes and disruption that's coming than it is what happened in 2020. So it feels like, talk about the manager squeeze. I feel like we're being squeezed between the disruption of COVID and the couple of years after that and the upcoming disruption. Almost every leader I talk to, and I've asked a lot of people lately, if you were to project what, in the next 10 years, do you think we'll have double-digit unemployment at some point? Every single person I've asked says yes. And so I think we know there's disruption as we sort out with AI, and there's angst in the marketplace and so on. So how do we build the skills and resources to really be prepared for that? One of them comes back to your point about question 5. Does your supervisor or someone at work seem to care about you as a person? If the answer to that is yes, that just creates this calming influence over us that says, instead of worrying about the future, I've surrounded myself with the right people. The people who, if things are going to be tight, they'll speak the truth to me instead of avoiding it until the severance package comes and I'm on the street, right? They'll help me understand that, hey, I think 6 months from now, we're going to have a challenge. Now would be a good time to upskill in this area or to, be prepared for that. So the other twist in the data, Ted, is that knowing what's expected of us at work and having the opportunity to do what we do best every day, we tend to think of new employees when we ask those questions. We forget about long-serving employees. Mm-hmm. We've got people who've been in a job for 10 or 20 years, and we assume they've been here so long, they must know how it works. When's the last time we looked at a job description with a 20-year employee? When's the last time we helped them understand how this change is going to affect them? The newer employees may be a little more resilient because they've never known any different. The older employees are still frustrated. They had to move from overhead projectors to PowerPoint, and then let alone whatever this AI stuff is. So I think we just got to slow down and ask those basic questions and say, there's a lot of change going on. How are you doing? And that brings in that supervisor cares about you, and have a genuine conversation about how are you feeling? What are your needs? How can I coach you through this and walk with you? So I think they're all related, but those are some of the things that I'm seeing anecdotally, and in some of those, it's a trend in our data. Others are still emerging.
I think one of the things too is what I'm seeing in highly engaged organizations now that, I get to be in that club and talk to others who have that, is there is also, I don't want to say a non-dependence, but more of an independence collegially between colleagues on coaching each other and having trusted conversations at that level, seeking and looking for positive reinforcement and acknowledgement of effort instead of waiting for a manager. In our space in public education, one of the things that was really difficult for me personally was I was a principal of a middle school with about 110 total certified staff members and another 60 staff, so just under 200 total people. When the first time we took the Q12, everything was about me and them. And that was tough because I don't evaluate 160 people, but I'm the leader of the building. Over time, as they started to see, oh no, my engagement's actually from my team leader or my colleagues, etc. Engagement shifted, as did the positive reinforcement. Emily, what are you seeing, kind of nationally with kind of tips and tricks on driving up those numbers to get people self-awareness that there are a lot of better things going on than I thought here?
Absolutely. I think, you said this at the start of the podcast that, the data doesn't always tell the human side of the story. There's people behind this data. And I think that there are really meaningful ways to turn it around. One of the things that is always amiss, and I think that we can actually do better about, is when you get this data back and see how your team is doing, you need to actually do something about it and talk with them about it. Because it's so foundational. It's that first step, but so many people miss doing it. And some people get their results back and they're so uncomfortable about, wow, everybody on my team felt way worse than I thought they were going to. And it's really hard to own up to that and say, what can I be doing? The other piece of it that I think we've talked about a bit is this like personal accountability element to it, and communicating what you need based on your own unique strengths. My manager is incredible. She manages a lot of different people. And I know that different people on our team, including myself, have different needs for how often we communicate with her. She tries to have that meaningful conversation with everybody once, but there's some of us who have a weekly connect with her, and there's some of us who have a monthly connect with her. And it's really a part of, this is where strengths can become a really important part of this, is understanding the individual needs of the people on your team and individualizing within reason, where it is realistic, so that you can help people feel better about their jobs and more engaged about their jobs. Just because only 20% of the globe is engaged in their job does not mean it has to be or stay at 20%. There really is so much that can be done.
I love what you said, and I'm going to challenge you to something where you said my manager is really good at this, and she's really. I would say, and anyone listening needs to know this too, leadership is very lonely. I don't think my brain ever thought so much about so many things until I started to, quote, get rank in organizations. And the higher you go in the pyramid of leadership, the less people there are for you to talk to. Mm-hmm. So when you have colleagues who, quote unquote, report to you or you're responsible for, I believe there's a shared responsibility also to point out when things are going well. Yeah. Because managers are on the other end of crises, complaints, and kvetching. And they're not always on the end of compliments, caring, boy, that was a lot of alliteration there unintentionally. I was on a roll. My wife hates when I do that. But like carrying conversations of, here, you're doing a really nice job, and I just want you to know I appreciate you. Mm-hmm. That fuels a manager for like 2 months. Where many employees need to hear that daily. A manager just needs to know kind of where I stand with everybody. And again, that falls back into two things. I believe everyone owns their own engagement. It's a manager's job to create those conditions so you can choose into engagement. But I also believe it's our own independent responsibility to lean into our strengths and make sure we're advocating for ourselves and being vulnerable.
Totally. I mean, I think it's a perfect way to describe it. Like, I know what I need better than my manager does because I'm the one who lives and feels it every single day. And so if I'm not helping her out by saying, hey, Emily, I need her name is Emily as well. I need this from you. Then, she can't read my mind, and she has a lot of minds that she's being expected to read, because that's a lot of what management is trying to
One of the most dangerous phrases that ever came out of my mouth in my marriage was one time Megan was staring at me, and I could tell she was staring through my soul. And I just said to her, hey, I can't hear your thoughts. I've used that a lot as a colleague, but I've never used it again at home. Tim, try it out tonight. Text me how it goes. But with the global workplace and those different trends, Tim, what are some things you're seeing innovative-wise on the strengths end in application and ideas?
Well, I'm talking to one of our award winners right now. So you and what you build at CISA 6, Ted, is really, really impressive. And the way you've sustained that over time is awesome. We every year we announce our Gallup Exceptional Workplace Award winners, and we release some of those stories, and we bring them together for events. And it's just fun to see some of the innovation that shows up there. We create the conditions for people to take this and run with it. And then we go study it when it's working. And I'm excited to learn more about this year's award winners and what they're doing that's unique and different. But I mean, a lot of it's not rocket science. A lot of it comes down to just intentional decisions, daily actions. What's the next right move? To Emily's point before about having meaningful conversations, that's still one of the best discoveries we've had in the last few years, is that having a meaningful conversation, about every 7 days with your manager is really important. Why? Because if we go more than a week or so, a lot of times that narrative starts chirping in our head and we make up stories that aren't even true. And, so having that regular interaction. Now, to Emily's point, not everyone necessarily needs a once a week meeting. Some might say, let's meet once a month. But I know Emily's manager well enough to know she's not avoiding them in those 30 days between meetings. She's texting, she's messaging them, she's checking in with them anyway. It's just whether it's a formal sit down or a impromptu or a text or whatever, we just got to be more intentional about those regular interactions, or things build up over time and that usually doesn't end well. So I know it's basic, but we just actually have to do it.
And again, that's a dual responsibility. If you're sitting around waiting for your manager or your principal or someone to come tell you something and they don't, and this is something I learned years ago. People are not thinking about me as much as I think they are. Mm-hmm. And that was really poignant advice for me, because that allowed me to step into the space to ask the question or call a manager or go into my superintendent's office or the president of the company's office and just say, hey, you got 2 minutes? Just want to know if we're okay. And
I have a friend that says an unspoken expectation can never be met.
Beautiful.
You heard that one before, Ted?
Wow. Yeah. Quoting me on, that's good. That's good work. Well, as we close out here, I want you both to just, kind of tell me, and Emily, with all the research, all the things that you have going on, what is a standout data point for you recently that created pause for you? Like, either good or bad.
Okay. I would say from a recent study on K-12 teachers where we were asking them about the policies or guidelines they've been given about AI at their school, we noticed a lot of teachers are saying we've gotten some guidance. Very few are saying I've gotten guidance about specific use cases, almost none, really. So they're being told, hey, you can use it or you can't use it, but they're not being told, how can you use it to communicate with parents if you should at all? How can you use it to, ideate ways to help meet a student's needs, if at all? And so we're seeing a huge gap in, hey, you can or can't use it from that point to the point of here's when you should and absolutely should not be using it. And here's where it may be helpful for you or may not be helpful for you. And so we're still needing a little bit more clarity there. I know it's a very fast changing landscape, but we're seeing some really interesting trends emerging where a lot of people are not really sure what they should be doing with it and what's safe and what's smart. And when you tack on the layer of how students are using it in class, it just gets even more complicated. So it's something we're continuing to unpack with every new teacher survey. But for any K-12 educators in the audience who are feeling a little frustrated or confused or just unclear, just know you're not alone and that it's a definitely emerging landscape. And we're doing some research to hopefully help with that soon.
Well, and again, that goes to I understand what's expected of me.
Absolutely.
And if I don't know if I can use Gemini, ChatGPT, Notebook LM, Gary's House of Artificial Intelligence, whatever the platforms are, that would get a little frustrating because in the industry of education, most people are rule followers, and that can really lead to a pinch point.
Definitely.
That's a really interesting point. So if we want to get this newest research, how do we find it?
So the best way to do it is to just Google Walton Family Foundation Gallup, and a page will come up that is our Teaching for Tomorrow study. That's the name of the study that has all of the reports and articles from this collaboration between Gallup and Walton Family Foundation. It's all focused on K-12 educators, everything from well-being, satisfaction, burnout, to more nuanced topics like how much time are teachers saving with AI, or how do teachers feel about very specific resources. I think today I scratched the surface a little bit of all the data that we have, but that webpage, our research hub for that study, is going to be an absolute gold mine of insights for anyone who is obsessed with data points like I am.
Yeah, and we'll drop that into the description on the podcast.
Perfect. Thanks, Ted.
And Tim, for you, like what should we be thinking about in the application of strengths, as leaders, colleagues, parents, people?
I would just say, I want to end with some encouragement. The kids are going to be okay, right? So a few weeks ago, I led a study abroad trip to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, where I took 10 of our student strengths coaches from the University of Nebraska. They taught classes at 3 different universities in Malaysia. They had one-on-one coaching sessions. We had the Malaysian students took the Clifton Strengths Assessment ahead of time. And I say Malaysian students, they were currently in Malaysia, but many of them were from all around the world, and they were in Malaysia for college and with hopes that someday they could come to America. And, our students were nervous about what this is going to be like, and are we going to have anything to talk about and all this. We weren't 3 minutes into the conversation, and the volume in the room just, there's all these conversations going on. Strengths really is a universal language. It crosses religious and cultural and country barriers. And when we get kind of whipped up around a lot of world events, and we should sometimes, it was just really mission rich to be to be standing in the room with American students and Malaysian students and students from Bangladesh and Oman and Pakistan, all around the world, sitting in a room together, laughing and joking and realizing we have a lot in common. So that I needed that, frankly. It was really, really encouraging, and the kids are going to be okay.
So when you run out something like that where it's global with one language, do you set up the room? Do you have like hey, if you lead with strategy, you're green, go over here. If you lead with execution, go in orange, go over here. If you lead with discipline, go over here. How do you do that?
Yeah, we prepared ahead of time. There were 10 students from Nebraska with it varied, but like 30 to 80 students from the other university. So it was a small enough group we were walking into. We prepared the day before, the morning of, with like, hey, here's some of the more common themes. By the way, most of the more common themes were the same as in my class in Lincoln. So it wasn't like it was drastically different. We have a whole lot more alike than we have different around the world. So we didn't set it up that way. We just put them in smaller groups and they led discussions. And they were curious about, what's it like to have this theme, and it was just neat to see them bond on that. So we didn't like put them in the domains. I think the domains are a really helpful organizing framework to get a strengths conversation started. I think when you have the actual themes underneath the domains, that's even more rich. So it's been really helpful and a good way to organize people. But to say I lead with executing talent, well, that's going to look different if it's my belief or if it's my achiever that's driving my executing talent. So when we have the detail of what those top themes are, and we create a space to say, who are you when you're at your best? Or what's the last challenge you've overcome? And how do you think your strengths played into that? Get somebody excited about that. It's really energizing.
So I'm going to end on a question that a strengths coach asked me 2 weeks ago when we were practicing, just kind of coaching each other. And yours were all positive, front facing, those prompts you just had. Here's what she asked me. And it literally, the